Well, let's talk about this. Hashish versus flower, right? You're starting out with a material that has less components in it, right? You've removed the plant material. You're talking about just less material in general, but less compounds present. And the compounds not only are going to transform individually into a variety of other compounds when smoked and applied, to heat, which I'll get into in a sec, but they also catalyze reactions with each other. So some of them can be catalysts for different conversions and different reactions that are happening. So there is a reason to believe that just straight up from, you know, actually profiling and looking at the smoke of a flower versus a hash, you're going to have a different effect from those two different, those two different materials. Just purely based on the amount of the amount of cannabinoids, terpenes, fatty, plant molecules, all sorts of stuff that's in the actual plant, different from what's in the hash. So that probably is overcomplicating a simple thing. Hash does feel different than flower, but it feels more similar to flower than some other concentrates, and there's a reason for that as well. It's coming from the flower, right? And I digress, but basically, there's three things happening when you're smoking, whether it's hash, whether it's flower, whether it's tobacco. It doesn't matter what it is. We're experiencing a combination of pyrolysis, thermal degradation, and combustion. And all three of those things are going to be doing slightly different things, but one thing they share in common is that they're going to create chemical transformations. So to relate this to what we do and why we call ourselves real isolates, we've confused a lot of people with our name. People assume that we create isolates and sell them. We don't. We actually purchase isolates, isolated cannabinoids and isolated compounds, to burn them or vaporize them at temperatures similar to smoking or to vaporizing, to see how they change and what they turn into. And our first ever project and our first ever experiment that we did was we took CBD isolate. It was readily available, obviously. This was a few years ago when it was really popular. And we burned it in a dab rig with a thermocoupler to control the temperature to be about 800 to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, for reference, basically the temperature of a cherry on a bowl or an ember on a joint. And at that temperature, CBD isolate, confirmed 99+% pure, even with NMR in our lab, turned into 18 different cannabinoids. The light bulb moment from there on was, look, I mean, we were taking these isolates to do this for control, to say, all right, well, if we have XYZ components in the starting material and each one of them is potentially going to turn into these things, which one of them and which combinations of them are going to create other, formulations in smoke that might contribute to certain effects? And that was a big moment for us. We said, holy cow. I mean, we've all been under the impression that basically the difference between smoking and eating an edible in cannabis, for example, which is our specialty in here, is absorption and metabolism. One's going in through the lungs, it's kicking in quickly, and may not first pass metabolize into 11-hydroxy, and the other one's going in through your GI tract. It delivers metabolizing, THC into 11-hydroxy, and it's different. No one ever talks about the fact that we're using extremely high temperatures when we even vaporize, but when we smoke. A Bic lighter, for example, burns at 2,000 plus degrees Fahrenheit. You apply that straight onto this plant material or this hash or the isolate or whatever it is you're smoking, that is a significantly higher temperature than you would ever see in a traditional extraction, for example. And it's worth noting. I mean, when you burn stuff, it changes. We know this, right? But it's really it's the tip of the iceberg, as I said before. I mean, there is a variety of products out there to look at with this. And
so just to clarify, when you heated the CBD to combustion temperatures, they were transformed into other cannabinoids, not just other non-cannabinoid molecules. That reminds me of an oral study on CBD and simulated gastric juice, which is some stomach acid.
Yep.
Where CBD in the test environment was changing into THC in this simulated, and then it was tried. Then people were like, "Whoa, is this happening in humans?" There were a couple of small studies in humans saying no, that it's different. But the point being is that a lot of what we do as humans to these molecules when we consume them is can be transformative, and that can include putting them in with alcohol or extracting them with alcohol, etc. Now, you mentioned more of what you guys do is on the edible side or is it on the inhalation side? I want to get that clear for the listeners out there.
Of course, yeah. So specifically, what we do is we've patented a method, right? Of it's a process of removing compounds from the smoke of plant and fungus material. So we provide a technology and intellectual property for people to perform research or to manufacture products, for example, in the cannabis industry, that would be smoke extracts. So the combination that you would find from the
Aha.
smoke, not from the plant, is what you capture with our method. And then you could make, cannabis infused products with those extracts. The idea there being that whether it's an edible or anything else, you can capture those cannabinoid profiles that are only found in the smoke that people are consuming when they smoke, and now put those into other things like an edible, for example. So if you ate an edible that's pure THC, that's a particular feeling that a lot of people are accustomed to now. If you eat an edible that has the profile of smoking the plant material that was made, that is going to feel a lot more like smoking than it is like an edible.
Curious. That's so curious. And I have always been more of a fan of how THC affects me as an inhalation as opposed to an edible. I personally do not like edibles. It's just
Me,
for me, and I know a lot of other people do.
me too.
Um,
I mean, they
uh,
certainly have convenience, and dosage is great, and there's a lot of things about edibles that are desirable. But I feel the same way, and a lot of people do too. You look at global cannabis revenue, large majority of it is smokable, inhalable products. You look at consumer preference surveys, large majority of them, like 75+% on average, say they prefer the effects of smoking. And we think that's basically because these transformations. And actually, quick fun fact before I forget: when you smoke THC forward cannabis, you're not actually inhaling a bunch of THC. You're transforming most of the THC into CBN and THC derivatives. You're still going to consume delta 9 THC, no doubt, but there is far less than we all thought before, I think.